The massive viewing chamber of Kepler Station hummed with the collective energy of 47 different species, each representing the pinnacle of their civilization's military might. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood at the rear of the assembly hall, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she observed the heated discussions unfolding before the massive holographic display. The image rotating slowly in the center of the room showed something that had sent ripples of fear across the entire galaxy. A dark, writhing mass of mechanical entities moving through space like a cosmic plague. High Counselor Zexthara, the serpentine leader of the Galactic Coalition, raised her scaled hand for silence. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded respect across star systems for over 3 centuries. Fellow beings of the Coalition, we face the return of the Void Swarm. Our ancestors spoke of them in whispers, believing them to be myths. The archaeological evidence from the Andromeda ruins suggests they consumed entire star systems before vanishing into the cosmic void a millennium ago. The chamber erupted in a symphony of different languages and communication methods. The crystalline Zarati rang like wind chimes in distress, while the gaseous nebulans flickered with rapid color changes that indicated extreme agitation. Through her universal translator, Admiral Vasquez could hear fragments of conversations ranging from panic to outright denial. Fleet Admiral Corvin of the Hive Collective clicked his mandibles repeatedly, a sign of deep contemplation among his insectoid species. His compound eyes reflected the holographic display as he spoke in his characteristic buzzing tone. The historical records indicate that the Void Swarm operates unlike any enemy we have encountered. They do not conquer for resources or territory. They consume technology itself, growing stronger with each civilization they devour. Commander Marcus Chun, Vasquez's second-in-command, leaned closer to whisper in her ear. "Ma'am, they're not even acknowledging our presence. Look at the seating arrangement." Indeed, the human delegation had been placed in the furthest corner of the chamber, behind even the newest coalition members who had joined within the past decade. Zexthara's attention turned to the various military commanders present. We must pool our greatest technological achievements to stand against this threat. The Ethereal Dominion will contribute their phase-shift weaponry, capable of striking targets across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Technosynthesis Union offers their self-replicating battle drones, each unit capable of adapting to enemy tactics in real time. The presentations continued for hours. The Quantum Collective unveiled their reality-warping cannons that could delete matter from existence. The Void Walkers demonstrated their ability to manipulate space-time itself, creating gravitational anomalies that could crush entire fleets. Each species seemed to compete with the others, showcasing increasingly sophisticated and incomprehensible technologies. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of cosmic one-upmanship, Zexthara's cold gaze fell upon the human delegation. "And what does Earth offer to our coalition?" Her tone carried the subtle condescension that had become all too familiar to human ears during their brief membership in the galactic community. Admiral Vasquez stood slowly, her boots clicking against the metal floor as she made her way toward the center of the chamber. The conversations died down, replaced by curious murmurs and what could only be described as barely concealed amusement from several species. She activated her personal display unit, a device that looked primitive compared to the holographic wonders that had preceded it. "The Terran Defense Force offers our strategic coordination capabilities," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of dozens of alien gazes upon her. "We propose establishing a communication network using our radio frequency technology, coupled with our analog backup systems for critical operations." The chamber fell silent for a moment before erupting in what could only be described as laughter across multiple species. The crystalline beings chimed in harmonious amusement, while the Hive Collective's buzzing reached a crescendo of mirth. Even the usually stoic ethereals seemed to shimmer with entertainment. High Admiral Kethver of the Technosynthesis Union spoke first, his mechanical voice dripping with disdain. Radio frequencies? Analog systems? These are technologies we abandoned before we achieved faster-than-light travel. Our quantum entanglement networks can communicate instantaneously across galactic distances. Indeed, added the ethereal representative, her form flickering between dimensions as she spoke. Our psychic relay networks transcend physical limitations entirely. Why would we regress to such primitive methods? Commander Chun stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. Because our primitive methods have proven reliable in situations where advanced systems fail. During the Proxima incident, when solar interference knocked out quantum communications across 3 systems, our radio networks remained operational. Fleet Admiral Corvin's mandibles clicked in what passed for dismissive laughter among his species. Solar interference is a minor inconvenience compared to the technological sophistication of the void swarm. Your electromagnetic signals would be like smoke signals against a hurricane. Admiral Vasquez maintained her composure, though Chun could see the slight tightening around her eyes that indicated her rising frustration. We also offer our tactical analysis protocols and adaptive command structures. Human military doctrine emphasizes flexibility and improvisation when facing unknown threats. Improvisation, repeated Zexthara, the word dripping with disdain. We have quantum predictive algorithms that can calculate millions of tactical scenarios simultaneously. We have artificial intelligences that can adapt to new threats faster than organic minds can process them. What use is improvisation when we have perfected the science of warfare? The Void Walker representative, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, pulsed with dim light as it spoke. The humans cling to their biological limitations. They fear to embrace the technological transcendence that we have achieved. Their offer is ... quaint. As the laughter and dismissive comments continued, Admiral Vasquez felt something she hadn't experienced since her academy days, the burning desire to prove everyone wrong. She had commanded human forces through 3 separate conflicts, each time facing enemies with technological superiority. Each time, human adaptability and ingenuity had found a way to victory. Very well, Zexthara announced, her voice cutting through the chamber's noise. The Terran Defense Force will be assigned to support operations. Your vessels will handle supply runs and civilian evacuations, while the primary fleet engages the Void Swarm directly. The dismissal was clear and absolute. As the various species began discussing their coordinated battle plans, the human delegation found themselves effectively ignored. Advanced holographic displays showed fleet formations, weapon configurations, and tactical scenarios that seemed to account for every possible variable except one, the possibility that their advanced technology might not be enough. Asterisk over the cough. Following days, as the Coalition assembled the largest armada in galactic history, the humans were relegated to the periphery. Their ships, while numerous, were considered obsolete. Their weapons, while effective, were deemed insufficient. Their tactics, while proven, were labeled as primitive. Admiral Vasquez watched from the observation deck of her flagship, the U.E.'s Determination, as the Coalition fleet took shape. Massive dreadnoughts bristling with quantum weaponry formed the battle line. Sleek cruisers equipped with reality-warping devices took flanking positions. Clouds of autonomous drones, each one supposedly superior to an entire human squadron, swarmed around the capital ships like deadly insects. Commander Chun joined her at the viewport, his tablet displaying the latest intelligence reports. Ma'am, our deep space monitoring stations have detected the Void Swarm's approach vector. They'll reach the outer defensive perimeter in 18 hours. Any changes to our orders? She asked, though she already knew the answer. No, ma'am. We're still assigned to the rear guard, 50,000 kilometers behind the main battle line. Our job is to evacuate survivors and collect debris for analysis. The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable, as if summoned by their conversation. Admiral Vasquez's communication console chimed with an incoming message. The holographic image of Fleet Admiral Corvin materialized, his compound eyes glittering with what might have been satisfaction. Asterisk. Admiral Vasquez, I trust your primitive vessels are prepared for their support role? The real warriors will handle the actual fighting, of course. Your task is simply to stay out of the way and clean up afterward. Understood, Admiral Corvin. The Terran Defense Force will be ready to assist as needed. Her voice remained professionally neutral, but Chun could see her hands clenching behind her back. Excellent. Oh, and Admiral? You might want to observe the battle from a safe distance. This will likely be the first and last time you witness true military might in action. The transmission ended with what sounded suspiciously like insectoid laughter as the hours passed and the void swarm drew closer. Sensor readings began to paint a picture of their enemy. The mechanical entities moved in perfect coordination, their formations shifting like liquid metal across the vast expanse of space. Unlike anything in the Coalition's database, they seemed to absorb energy rather than radiate it, peering as dark voids against the star-filled backdrop. The Coalition fleet took their positions with military precision that would have been impressive if not for the arrogance that accompanied it. Each species' vessels formed distinct groups, their commanders confident in their technological superiority. Advanced sensors swept space for intelligence. Quantum computers calculated optimal firing solutions, and artificial intelligences ran. Millions of battle simulations in the rear guard. The human fleet maintained a different atmosphere entirely. Officers reviewed analog backup procedures. Technicians checked physical circuit breakers, and communication specialists tested their radio equipment. It was a scene that would have prompted more laughter from their allies, if those allies had bothered to pay attention. Admiral Vasquez stood on her bridge, watching the tactical display that showed the approaching enemy. Something about the void swarm's movement patterns troubled her, though she couldn't quite articulate what. They moved with purpose, but there was something else, something that suggested they were not just approaching, but analyzing. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Sarah Park from the communications station. "I'm detecting some unusual electromagnetic interference from the direction of the void swarm. It's almost like they're scanning our frequencies." Before Admiral Vasquez could respond, the long-range sensors detected the first contact. The void swarm had arrived at the outer defensive perimeter, and the battle for the galaxy was about to begin. Asterisk the revelation. The first shots of the battle lit up space, like a deadly fireworks display. From her position 50,000 kilometers behind the main battle line, Admiral Vasquez watched through her ship's viewports as the Coalition fleet unleashed their technological fury upon the void swarm. Quantum cannons fired beams of pure energy that could theoretically unmake matter at the subatomic level. Reality warping devices created gravitational anomalies that should have crushed the enemy formations like tin cans. For a moment, it seemed the Coalition's confidence was justified. The leading edge of the void swarm appeared to buckle under the assault, with several mechanical entities disintegrating under the quantum bombardment. Victory declarations began transmitting across the Coalition's communication networks in dozens of languages. Then everything changed. The void swarm entities that had been destroyed suddenly reformed, their dark hulls reassembling from the quantum energy that had supposedly annihilated them. Worse, they seemed to be growing larger, more complex, as if they were incorporating the advanced technology used against them into their own systems. "Commander," Chun's face went pale as he read the sensor data. "Ma'am, the enemy units are adapting to our allies' weapons." The quantum signatures are being absorbed and integrated. They're not just surviving the attacks, they're learning from them. On the primary communication channel, panic began to creep into the voices of the coalition commanders. Fleet Admiral Corvin's usual composure cracked as he barked orders to his drone swarms. Impossible. Our quantum algorithms predicted this was their primary weakness. Recalculate targeting solutions immediately. But the recalculations came too late. The Void Swarm had begun their counterattack, and it was unlike anything the Coalition had ever faced. Instead of conventional weapons, the enemy used the galaxy's own advanced technology against them. Quantum cannons fired Coalition-designed energy signatures back at their creators. Reality-warping devices turned against their operators, creating spatial distortions that trapped entire squadrons in temporal loops. Admiral Vasquez watched in horror as the ethereal Dominion's flagship, a magnificent vessel that existed partially outside normal space-time, was suddenly forced into full reality and then systematically dismantled by its own phase-shift weaponry. The crystalline vessels of the Zerati began resonating at frequencies that shattered their own hulls, while the Technosynthesis Union's adaptive drones turned on their creators with horrifying efficiency. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Park called from her station, her voice tight with stress. "I'm losing communication with the front lines. The quantum entanglement networks are collapsing, and the psychic relay systems are being jammed by some kind of technological interference." On the tactical display, the neat formations of the Coalition fleet began to dissolve into chaos. Without their advanced communication systems, the various species' fleets could no longer coordinate their attacks. The artificial intelligences that had promised perfect tactical adaptation were being overridden by the Void Swarm's superior computational power. In less than 30 minutes, the galaxy's most technologically advanced armada was being systematically destroyed by their own weapons. "Hi," Counselor Zexthara's voice crackled through the deteriorating communication network, her usual composure replaced by barely controlled panic. "All units, fall back to secondary positions. Our primary weapons are ineffective. Repeat, our primary weapons are ineffective against the enemy." But the retreat order never reached most of the fleet. The quantum networks had collapsed entirely, leaving thousands of vessels isolated and vulnerable. The psychic relays that the ethereals had considered infallible were being overwhelmed by a technological presence that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Commander Chun turned to Admiral Vasquez, his expression grim. "Ma'am, we're receiving fragments of distress calls on multiple frequencies. It sounds like the entire front line is collapsing. Can we reach them?" she asked, her mind already working through the possibilities. "Not through conventional coalition channels. The quantum networks are completely dark, and the psychic relays are being actively jammed. But—" he paused, checking his console. "Ma'am, our radio systems are still functional. All frequencies are clear." For the first time since the battle began, Admiral Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. "Lieutenant Park, open a channel on all radio. Frequencies, emergency broadcast protocol. This is Admiral Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force to all Coalition vessels. If you can hear this transmission, respond immediately." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of voices in multiple languages flooded the radio channels, all speaking at once in a cacophony of panic and confusion. Ship commanders, who had dismissed human technology as primitive, were now desperately grateful for any form of communication. "This is Captain Veltar of the ethereal cruiser Starlight. Our quantum systems are compromised. We cannot contact our fleet command. Request immediate assistance. Zerati vessel Crystal Song to human fleet. Our harmonic networks are jammed. We are cut off from all tactical data. Please advise." The calls continued to pour in, each one representing a piece of the shattered Coalition fleet. Admiral Vasquez looked at Commander Chun, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations were helpless, reduced to using primitive human radio technology to coordinate their survival. Commander, contact all human vessels. We're taking tactical command of the surviving coalition forces. Use standard radio protocols for all communications. She turned to her tactical officer. Begin plotting rescue and reorganization patterns. We need to get these ships away from the enemy's adaptive capabilities. Ma'am, interrupted Lieutenant Park, I'm receiving a transmission from High Counselor Zex Thara. She's requesting permission to coordinate with our command structure. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The same leader who had dismissed human capabilities as primitive was now begging for human assistance. Admiral Vasquez considered letting the moment stretch, savoring the vindication, but her duty to protect innocent lives overrode any personal satisfaction. Put her through, Lieutenant. Zex Thara's image appeared on the main screen, her usually pristine appearance disheveled and her scaled features tight with stress. Behind her, sparks flew from damaged consoles as her crew struggled to maintain basic ship functions. Admiral Vasquez, she began, her voice lacking its usual condescension, our advanced systems have been compromised. The enemy appears to be using our own technology against us. We need your assistance. What kind of assistance, High Counselor? Admiral Vasquez kept her voice neutral, professional. Your radio networks are the only communication system still functioning. We need you to coordinate a fighting withdrawal. Our species' survival may depend on it. The weight of the moment settled on Admiral Vasquez's shoulders. The same beings who had mocked human technology and relegated them to support roles were now completely dependent on that same technology for survival. She could have pointed out the irony, could have reminded them of their earlier dismissal and arrogance. Instead, she did what humans had always done when faced with impossible odds. She adapted. Understood, High Counselor. We'll coordinate the withdrawal, but you'll need to follow our tactical protocols. Our analog systems require different procedures than your quantum networks. Over the next several hours, something remarkable happened. Using nothing more sophisticated than radio waves and human tactical doctrine, Admiral Vasquez began to reorganize the scattered coalition forces. Ships that had lost all contact with their command structures were guided to rally points using simple voice communications. Wounded vessels were directed to safe zones by human controllers, who calculated trajectories with slide rules and paper charts. The Void Swarm continued their advance, but their progress slowed as they encountered tactics they couldn't easily adapt to. Human military doctrine, developed through centuries of warfare with limited technology, emphasized flexibility and improvisation over technological dominance. When quantum computers failed, humans used their brains. When artificial intelligence was compromised, humans relied on intuition and experience. Commander Chun coordinated the rescue of 3 ethereal vessels, whose crews had been trapped in temporal distortions created by their own phase shift technology. Using basic mathematics and radio triangulation, human navigators guided them back to normal spacetime, while their advanced quantum systems remained helplessly offline. Lieutenant Park established communication networks that allowed the crystalline Sarati to coordinate their harmonic weapons without relying on their vulnerable telepathic links. The simple radio protocols that had been dismissed as primitive provided a level of reliability that their advanced systems couldn't match. As the withdrawal continued, patterns began to emerge that revealed the true nature of the Void Swarms. Threat. They weren't just adapting to individual technologies. They were learning to exploit the fundamental weaknesses of over-reliance on complex systems. The more sophisticated a civilization's technology, the more vulnerable they were to having that technology turned against them. Admiral Vasquez realized this during a brief lull in the evacuation efforts. She was reviewing tactical reports when the pattern became clear. The Void Swarm's attacks were most effective against the most technologically advanced vessels. The Ethereal Dominion's flagship had been destroyed first, followed by the Technosynthesis. Union's adaptive drones, the species that relied most heavily on artificial intelligence, and quantum computing were suffering the heaviest losses. In contrast, the human vessels, with their primitive analog systems and manual controls, were proving surprisingly resilient. When the enemy tried to adapt their technology, there was nothing complex enough to subvert. Radio signals were too simple to be easily jammed. Mechanical systems were too basic to be overridden. Human intuition was too unpredictable to be calculated. "Ma'am," Commander Chun reported, "we've successfully evacuated 60% of the surviving coalition forces. The enemy advance has slowed significantly, almost as if they're confused by our retreat patterns." Admiral Vasquez nodded, a plan beginning to form in her mind. "Commander, I want you to analyze the enemy's response patterns. Look for inconsistencies in their adaptation protocols." The analysis revealed something remarkable. The Void Swarm excelled at incorporating and subverting advanced technology, but they struggled with simplicity. Their sophisticated algorithms were designed to analyze and counter complex systems, not basic ones. They could turn quantum cannons against their creators, but they couldn't easily adapt to simple kinetic weapons. They could override artificial intelligence, but they couldn't predict human creativity. Lieutenant Park, open a channel to all surviving coalition vessels. It's time to show them what human ingenuity can accomplish. The counterattack that followed would be remembered in galactic history as the Battle of Simple Solutions. Under human coordination, the coalition forces abandoned their most advanced weapons in favor of basic kinetic systems. Quantum computers were shut down in favor of analog calculations. Artificial intelligence was replaced by human judgment and alien intuition working in harmony. The Void Swarm, suddenly faced with tactics they couldn't easily analyze or adapt to, began to falter. Their formations, previously fluid and responsive, became rigid and predictable. Their adaptation protocols, designed for technological sophistication, couldn't cope with the creative chaos of organic military thinking. High Counselor Zexthara's voice came through the radio network, her tone carrying a mixture of amazement and respect. "Admiral Vasquez, your tactical approach is unprecedented. Our sensors show the enemy formations beginning to break up. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one, High Counselor," Admiral Vasquez replied. "Complex problems don't always require complex answers." The battle continued for another 18 hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Void Swarm, faced with an enemy they couldn't technologically subvert, began a fighting withdrawal toward the galactic rim. They had consumed what advanced technology they could, but they had learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of underestimating simpler approaches. As the immediate threat receded, the true impact of the battle became clear. The galactic balance of power had shifted dramatically. The species that had once looked down on human technology now viewed it with newfound respect. More importantly, they had learned that technological advancement without wisdom could become a fatal weakness. In the aftermath, as the coalition fleets regrouped and assessed their losses, Admiral Vasquez found herself summoned to a formal assembly. Aboard High Counselor Zexthara's rebuilt flagship, the chamber was notably different from their previous meeting. This time, the human delegation was seated at the central table in positions of honor typically reserved for the most respected species. "Admiral Vasquez," Zexthara began, her voice carrying none of its former condescension, "the Galactic Coalition owes humanity a debt that cannot easily be repaid. Your tactical leadership and technological reliability saved not just our fleets, but our civilizations. The other species representatives nodded in agreement. Their various forms of communication expressing similar sentiments. Fleet Admiral Corvin, his compound eyes reflecting new respect, spoke for many when he said, "We have learned that advancement is not always about complexity. Sometimes, the most sophisticated approach is to embrace simplicity." Admiral Vasquez stood, accepting the recognition with the grace and humility that had become characteristic of human diplomacy. The Coalition has taught us much about the possibilities of advanced technology. In return, we've shared what we've learned about the importance of keeping things simple enough to remain reliable when everything else fails. The formal ceremony continued with the announcement of humanity's new role within the Coalition. No longer relegated to support positions, human tacticians would work alongside the galaxy's military leaders. Human technology, once dismissed as primitive, would be integrated into Coalition defense systems as backup protocols. Most importantly, human approaches to problem-solving would be studied and incorporated into galactic military doctrine. Asterisk. As the various representatives departed to rebuild their fleets and reassess their strategies, Commander Chun approached Admiral Vasquez with a slight smile. "Ma'am, it seems our primitive technology has earned us a place at the grown-ups' table." Admiral Vasquez returned the smile, looking out at the stars through the viewport. Sometimes the best way to prove your worth is to be there when everyone else's sophisticated solutions fail. The galaxy learned something important today, that progress isn't always about moving forward. Sometimes it's about remembering what works. The human fleet departed Kepler Station not as minor players in a galactic drama, but as respected partners in an alliance that had learned to value both innovation and reliability. The Void Swarm threat had been contained, but more importantly, the galaxy had discovered that true strength came not from the most advanced technology, but from the wisdom to know when simple solutions were the most sophisticated choice of all. In the weeks that followed, human radio technology would be installed on every Coalition vessel as emergency backup systems. Human tactical officers would be assigned to every major fleet command, and human approaches to problem-solving would be taught at military academies across the galaxy. The species that had once mocked humanity's primitive ways had learned the most important lesson of all, that sometimes the most advanced civilizations are those wise enough to remember that complexity is not always superior to simplicity, and that the greatest technology is the one that works when everything else fails. The galaxy would never again make the mistake of underestimating human ingenuity, and humanity would never again be relegated to the background when the fate of civilizations hung in the balance. The age of human respect in the galactic community had begun, earned not through superior technology, but through the timeless human virtues of adaptability, reliability, and the courage to prove doubters wrong when it mattered most. Asterisk.